Azubike's eyes shot open, panic gripping his chest. "Where am I?" he asked in his head. The last thing he remembered was being dragged before his enraged father, King Akinwande, to be executed for the crime of loving Princess Adaku of Oyoland. He began hyperventilating as flashes of raised swords and his mother's wretched screams echoed through his mind. "Adaku," he gasped, whipping his head around frantically. Relief washed over him as he spotted her lying beside him, her chest gently rising and falling with sleep. Azubike gently shook her shoulder. "Adaku, my love, wake up." Adaku slowly blinked her eyes open, squinting in confusion at her unfamiliar surroundings. They appeared to be in some sort of dense forest, the morning sun barely penetrating the thick canopy overhead. "Azubike? What's happening?" "Where are we?" she asked groggily. "I don't know," he replied, his voice tense. "But the last thing I recall was being brought forth for." He couldn't bring himself to say the word. Adaku's eyes widened as the awful memory rushed back their lover's execution ordered by their own families. "The blinding light," she whispered, her voice trembling. "That immense force that seemed to engulf us in its power." They both fell silent, neither able to make sense of what revelatory cosmic forces had spared them from the executioner's blades. The sound of rustling foliage shook them from their daze. Azubike and Adaku were still trying to make sense of their new surroundings when an old fisherman approached them in the forest. The man squinted at them curiously. "Well, now what do we have here?" "You two aren't from around these parts, are you?" the fisherman said in a raspy voice. My name is Baba Oruko. Who might you strange folks be?" Azubike glanced at Adaku, then replied, "It's hard to explain, sir. We're travelers of sorts who seem to have arrived here by extraordinary means." Baba Oruko stroked his wispy gray beard. "Is that so? You two look a bit worse for wear. Those fancy city clothes are torn to bits. Your fine clothes may have fooled some, but you don't take me for a fool, do you, boy?" Azubike realized they were still wearing tattered remnants of their royal attire from back in Iwoland and Oyoland. She suddenly felt very self-conscious. "You're right. Our apologies," he said humbly. "We've been through quite an ordeal. Please, could you help us? We have no place to stay and we don't know where we are." The old fisherman studied them for a moment, then gave a warm smile. Of course. I may be just a simple fisherman, but I won't turn away two souls in need of shelter. Come along to my humble hut until you get your bearings." Grateful, Azubike and Adaku followed Baba Oruko down a winding forest path. After about a mile, they emerged into a small village of thatched roof huts. "This is Agada, my little fishing village," Baba Oruko explained. "Not much to look at, but home is home." He led them to a modest hut on the edge of the village. Inside, it was simply but neatly kept with a few cots, a fire pit, and fishing nets hanging on the walls. "Make yourselves comfortable," the old man said. "I'll see about finding you both some fresh clothes to wear. Those royal get-ups stand out too much around these parts." While Baba Oruko rummaged through his humble belongings, Azubike whispered to Adaku, "He doesn't recognize us as the prince and princess. To him, we're just strangers." "It's for the best," Adaku replied quietly. "No need to burden this kind soul with the truth of who we are and where we came from, at least not yet." Soon, Baba Oruko returned with simple tunics and wraps for them to change into. As they changed, he prepared a hearty stew of locally caught fish and vegetables. "There you are. Eat up," he said, ladling big portions into wooden bowls. "You can tell me your stories later. For now, just rest yourselves." Azubike and Adaku did not need to be told twice. Whatever metaphysical journey had brought them here, they were simply grateful to have a hot meal and safe shelter thanks to the hospitality of this simple fisherman who treated them as equals, not royalty. Perhaps this new realm would allow their eternal love to blossom further, away from the prejudices of their former lands. For now, they will regain their strength tonight. Meanwhile, back in the kingdoms of Iwoland and Oyoland, the rulers were utterly baffled and unnerved by the strange events surrounding their heir's transcendent experience. In the throne room of Iwoland's palace, King Akinwande paced back and forth furiously, while Queen Omosalawa sat huddled in her throne, shaking her head in disbelief. Where moments earlier they had watched their son Azubwike kneeling for execution, a blinding cosmic light had erupted, bathing them all in brilliance before the prince seemed to evaporate into shimmering mists. Sorcery. Dark trickery, Akinwande bellowed, slamming his jeweled fist on the armrest. Those Oyolander devils must have cast some unholy spell to spirit away my son before justice could be served. Omosalawa looked up at her husband with wild, fearful eyes. But my king, we all witnessed it with our own eyes. Prince Azubwike, he and that Oyolander witch became beings of pure light before dissolving like ethereal vapors. What foul majesty could conjure such an apocalypse of profane energies? Silence, Woman Akinwande roared, his face purpling with rage. My one true heir has been transmuted into abominable asunders by our blood enemies. I will not rest until Azubwike has been restored to corporeal form and the perpetrators of this blasphemy utterly ruined Ignal. Across the border in Oyoland, a similar uproar had gripped the royal palace. Queen Funmalayo marched through the halls, unleashing a torrent of hysterics. Treacherous vipers from the seventh circle of Unterring, she shrieked at her cowering guards. You dare allow my virgin daughter to be sacrificed before my eyes, only to be swept into some heinous, unknowable utterance. King Olawal finally entered, having witnessed the unexplainable phenomenon himself. His face was drained of all color, his mouth hanging open in a look of haunted shock. For the first time, the rulers of these ancient lands had been disgraced by forces more powerful than any cruel magic in their forbidden texts. As the news of the missing heirs continued, dark rumors began spreading like wildfire through the streets of Ireland and Oyoland. Whispers turned into shouts that Prince Azubwike and Princess Adaku were dead, struck down by the other kingdom in an act of ultimate treachery. In the markets and taverns of Ireland's capital city, commoners traded wild tales of assassins from Oyoland slaying Azubwike right before the execution to sow chaos. Evil snake-hearted cowards and angered merchant shouted to a crowd. Those Oyolanders feared facing our prince's justified punishment, so they used foul magic to obliterate his very soul. Across the border, similarly outrageous stories accused Ireland's rulers of making a sacrificial blood offering of Adaku's innocence to their pagan gods of warfare. I saw it with my own two eyes, an old fishwife cried, waving her bony hands. The Irelanders summoned demonic shades to swallow Princess Adaku whole when she refused to renounce her love for their devil prince. However, back in Agada village, after a few days under the kind hospitality of Baba Oruko, Azubwike and Adaku began thinking about establishing themselves more permanently in the small fishing village of Agada. Though deeply grateful for the old fisherman's generosity, they didn't want to impose on him indefinitely. One afternoon, as Baba Oruko prepared his nets for the evening's fishing run, Azubwike approached him. Sir, you have been most gracious to take us in during our time of need. However, Adaku and I wish to find our own means here in the village. Baba Oruko looked up from his work, eyebrows raised. Is that so? And what plan do you travelers have to support yourselves? Well, Azubwike glanced at Adaku, who gave an encouraging nod. We were hoping to procure some small living quarters of our own to rent, but I must shamefully admit, we have no money available to us currently. The old fisherman stroked his whiskery chin in thought. No money, eh? Most landlords in these parts won't take you in without at least a few pebble pearls to show you can pay rent. Adaku stepped forward. Please, sir, we may be outsiders, but we are certainly not averse to hard work. If you could allow us to take on some labor tasks in exchange for a few nights' accommodation somewhere, we would be eternally grateful. Baba Oruko studied the young couple closely for a moment. Though they spoke with regal eloquence despite their humble garments, he detected no malice or guile behind their words. Just two wayward youths adrift, yet determined to find honest purpose. You know, he said at last. Old Mama Neka down the road has been looking for some extra sets of hands to help maintain her family farm outside of town. It's tough work, plowing and harvesting and such, but I'm sure she could put you two up in the barn loft for a spell if you put in a good day's labor. Azubwike and Adaku's eyes lit up with renewed hope. That would be a tremendous opportunity, the prince exclaimed. We reassure you, no task is too humble if it provides an honest path. Baba Oruko smiled and clapped Azubwike on the back. It'll be the start of a good, simple life for you both, free from whatever troubles you fled. Come, let's go have a picnic with Mama Neka about her farm right now, while the sun's still high. As he led the formerly regal lovers towards Mama Neka's homestead, Baba Oruko couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. These two youths, for all their obvious elegance, were determined to make their way through fortitude and hard work rather than titles or pedigree. Perhaps that uncommon humility would serve them well in Agada's humble community. For Azubwike and Adaku's part, they felt a kindling spark of renewal, a chance to finally escape the prejudices and hostilities of their former lives. As Baba Oruko led Azubwike and Adaku towards Mama Neka's farm, the old fisherman pulled them aside for a moment. "You know," he said in a low voice, "if you two really are trying to start fresh lives away from whatever troubles you fled, you may want to consider changing your given names." Azubwike and Adaku exchanged a worried look. Of course, their regal names could potentially tie them back to Iwoland and Oyaland if word spread. "You don't think Mama Neka or the other villagers would turn us away, do you?" Adaku asked apprehensively. Baba Oruko waved his hand dismissively. "Oh no, Agada is a place of peace. We accept all folks looking for honest new homes here, no questions asked much. But still, it may draw unwanted eyes if the missing prince and princess happen to resurface nearby." Azubwike stroked his chin thoughtfully. "You make a wise point, elder. Perhaps new names to start our new simple lives would be prudent." He turned to Adaku with a smile. "My love, what noble names should we choose to dawn this new chapter?" Adaku's eyes brightened as an idea struck her. "Well, my brave protector, how about you take the name Alakaija, son of the great god of miracles? For you have truly been a miracle worker in transcending us to this promised land." Azubwike grinned and squeezed her hand. "And you, my luminous angel, shall be Epitome, daughter of the great hunter, for your radiant spirit first hunted and captured my heart from the moment we met." The newly christened Alakaija and Epitome then turned back to Baba Oruko, who chuckled heartily. "Well, those are certainly names befitting a fresh start in Agada. Alakaija and Epitome it is then. Now quickly, before Mama Neka burns through the rest of this day's patience waiting on us." As they continued on, Epitome leaned in to whisper to Alakaija, "Do you think our families will ever be able to find us under these new guises?" Alakaija squeezed her hand reassuringly. "I certainly hope not, at least not until the flames of hatred back in Iwoland and Oyaland have fully extinguished themselves. We know all too well our parents would search indefinitely for their missing heirs to inflame their centuries-old rivalry anew." Epitome nodded solemnly, "Which is precisely why we must seize this opportunity to nurture the seeds of our eternal love and let its truth blossom organically in this fertile new realm, unblemished by those antiquated prejudices." Rounding a bend, the trio spotted Mama Neka's modest barn houses up ahead, draft animals blowing in the fields. As newly minted members of Agada's working folks, Alakaija and Epitome prepared to prove their cosmic bond could nurture sustenance through any humble endeavors. Alakaija felt a surge of determination as he and Epitome approached Mama Neka's farmstead. Though he had been born a prince, raised in luxury back in Iwoland, he was now a commoner tasked with supporting himself and his beloved through honest labor. "Do not worry, my radiant Epitome," he said confidently. "I vow to be a diligent worker who will secure a safe shelter and provide for our needs through the sweat of my brow." Epitome smiled lovingly at her soulmate. "I have no doubts, my brave Alakaija. Your spirit has already transcended the limits of this mortal plane. Simple labors will be no obstacle on our path forward." The couple followed Baba Oruko through the farm's main gates to where a stout, elderly woman was instructing some hands on weeding duties. This must be the formidable Mama Neka. "You there," Mama Baba Oruko called out. "I've brought you some able-bodied help like you asked for." Mama Neka squinted over at them, wiping her brow. "Is that so? Well, they better not be as lazy as that last bunch of driftabouts you sent." The old fisherman chuckled and waved Alakaija and Epitome forward. "Not to worry, these two know the value of hard work. This here's Alakaija and Epitome, newly arrived from." Well, very far away. Mama Nika looked at them appreciatively. Though their tattered clothes were relatively clean, she could detect a certain regal bearing about their postures and speech. Hashem, you don't seem like the typical ruffians and drifters always looking to slick out of a hard day's efforts. You two got any farmstead experience to go with those fine aristocrat manners. Alakija stepped forward and bowed respectfully. We are but humble newcomers to your land seeking honest work and purpose, good matriarch. Though we were born to other circumstances, our hearts belong to the purity of the soil and the nourishing foods it yields. Epitome curtsied. We ask only for a chance to learn the simple agricultural arts from your wisdom, and some modest corner to lay our heads in exchange for our toils, great mother. Mama Nika grunted in approval at their well-spoken humility. Sometimes the most earnest workers came from unexpected noble stock, unburdened by the pride of more provincial day laborers. You've got a honey-tongued way with words there, Alakija. But let's see if those aristocrat mitts can hack at long hours pulling up weeds and slinging cattle muck, eh? She jerked a thumb over her shoulder. For now, you two make yourselves useful in the northern outer fields, breaking up the soil clods and preparing for new planting. Alternative sleeping in the tool shed if you last past supper. Alakija and Epitome could barely contain their joy at being given this chance to prove their merits. As Baba Oruko headed back to his fishing nets, they eagerly followed Mama Nika to the fields to begin their first hard day's work as common villagers. Though the hot sun bore down relentlessly and the rocky soil determinedly resisted their plows and hoes, Alakija and Epitome attacked their tasks with selfless vigor. Every bead of sweat shed, every blister callousing their once pampered palms became badges of humble honor. Throughout the endless hours bent over the dry earth, the new farm hands exchanged playful banter and idle chatter to uplift their steadfast efforts. Alakija regaled Epitome with fanciful tales he spun about their purported origins as interstellar cosmic deities who had chosen to grace this world by assuming simple agrarian avatars. Laughing joyfully at his far-fetched parables, Epitome reciprocated with poetic invocations of how each kernel of grain they sowed was instilled with the divine spark of spiritual renewal. Their souls were luminous enough to imbue any task with deeper transcendent purpose beyond its crude appearance to mortal eyes. As the fiery sunset finally crept across the fields, even the gruff Mama Nika had to admit surprise at the newly coined farm hands' inexhaustible enthusiasm and progress. Alakija and Epitome had cleared and retilled nearly a quarter of her northernmost crop acres in a single day, putting many of her more experienced field crews to shame. She muttered, squinting at the smiling, dirt-stained couple wiping their brows nearby. Maybe there's more to you starry-eyed lovers than meets the eye. Aight, lesson learned, you've earned your space in the tool shed for the night. Alakija and Epitome could barely contain their elation at pleasing their new employer. As Mama Nika stomped off to distribute the evening meal rations, they shared a long, breathless embrace, reveling in the simple yet profound satisfaction of a full day's humble work. See, my Epitome, Alakija murmured happily. Our great cosmic truth translates just as powerfully to these modest capacities. We need not resort to metaphysical feats to spread our eternal love's radiant message. Epitome beamed and stroked her lover's sweat-soaked brow adoringly. Indeed, my Alakija. However, after many back-breaking weeks staying in the farm laboring as farm hands for the gruff but fair-minded Mama Nika, Alakija and Epitome had more than proven their worth through tireless efforts and humble devotion to the land. One evening, as the newly minted couple wearily plodded back from the southern fields after a grueling day's harvesting, Mama Nika pulled them aside with an appraising look. You two sure did put that lazy crew of drifters I had before to shame, she said in her usual blunt manner. Haven't seen a worker take to the honest plow with such vigor in a long while. Alakija smiled and gave a respectful bow. The noble act of coaxing sustenance from the mother soil is its own empowering reward, great matriarch. Epitome curtsied. Indeed, tending these fertile lands has been a blessing that nourishes our weary spirits as much as our empty bellies. Mama Nika squinted at them, a hint of a smirk playing across her weathered features. That's a poetically phrased way of saying farm work's got you two dead dogs tired every night, ain't it? The couple shared an embarrassed laugh as the old woman continued appraising them thoughtfully. "Well, keeping you starry-eyed lovers bunking in that cramped tool shed probably ain't helping much with the ache in your bones, I reckon. Hard to muster energy for honest ploughing and sowing when your own humble resting place." She jutted her thumb over her shoulder towards a small outlying hut barely visible in the distance, surrounded by shady palms and flowering bushes. "That little domicile has been sitting vacant for longer than I can remember. Just a single room, but roomier than the shed at least, and all to yourselves, if you're aiming to finally put down some roots here in Agata proper." Alakija and Abideme's eyes went wide with surprise and elation. After so many weeks of back-breaking labor, the prospect of upgrading to even slightly more dignified living quarters was an unexpected boon. You would bestow such an honor on us?" Mama Abidemi asked in amazement. "We have toiled only to earn our keep, never expecting rewards beyond life's basic Fiji." Mama Nika waved a calloused hand dismissively. "Think nothing of it, Wildflower. Folks around here don't get far playing silly hedge games of lording over others for advantage. We all owe our prosperity to the same blessed soil that sprouts from these fields." She fixed them both with a look that was almost warm beneath her usual gruff demeanor. "The truth is, you two have demonstrated your worth many times over with your workhorse tenacity and good humors. Damn well earned a patch of ground to call your own in these parts, if that's what you both aim to christen." By now Alakija was beaming with immense gratitude. He took Abidemi's hands in his, feeling their eternal cosmic energies harmonizing in profound resonance at this generous offer. "Great Mama of the fertile plains, we humbly accept your compassionate gift with fullest gratitude," he replied, eyes shining. "That tiny domicile shall become the sacred hub from which we'll continue singing our joyful hymns in service to these lands." Abidemi nodded vigorously. "Our deepest reverence for allowing us to finally plant the seeds of permanence in your nurturing soils." As the couple bowed in humble appreciation, Mama Neka reached into the pocket of her dusty apron and retrieved an old rusted key. "Well, what you two waiting for?" she said, tossing them the key with an amused grunt. "That little hut won't go christing itself now. Get yourselves moved in proper so we can continue your folks' good works without distraction come next sunrise." Upon catching the key, Alakija impulsively pulled the old woman into a fierce embrace which she protested at first before awkwardly patting his back. Abidemi beamed, tears of joy streaking through the dirt on her cheeks. "Bless you, Mama of Agata," Alakija exclaimed, finally releasing her. "You have given these weary travelers much more than a simple roof over our heads. With this chance to germinate new roots, you are allowing our eternal truth to finally blossom amidst your fertile, nurturing grounds." Mama Neka looked slightly taken aback by such poetic gratitude over a ramshackle hut, but she understood these two came from finer dust spun stock than their rust-spun appearance let on. And with their unshakable humility and vigor, they'd likely transform that little shed into a palace of sustainable energies in no time. "Well, you're quite welcome, children," she managed with an uncharacteristic paternal pride. "Welcome home to Agata, where the glow of your good works will be honored the same as any king's golden boon." However, back in the two kingdoms, days turned into weeks, and still there was no sign of the missing Prince Azubwaik or Princess Ataku in the lands of Iwoland and Oyoland. The fragile peace that had briefly blossomed between the two kingdoms after the lovers' cosmic transcendence quickly withered and died on the vines of distrust and prejudice. In Iwoland's royal palace, King Akinwande grew more embittered and paranoid with each sunrise that failed to return his heir. His fury burned equally at the thought of Azubwaik being slain by Oyolander conspirators, or worse, turned forever against his own kingdom by that deceitful harlot, Adaku's sorcerous manipulations. One morning, the enraged king summoned his most elite warriors and trackers to the throne room. As the highly skilled soldiers knelt before him, Akinwande paced back and forth, clenched fists trembling with impotent rage. "For far too long, we have writhed powerless, while dark forces from our blood enemies conspire against Iwoland," he shouted, spittle flying. "First, with their villainous spell weaving to spirit away my only son and heir, and now, no doubt, holding him enthralled through blasphemous human sacrifices and demon pacts." The warriors watched stoically as their liege raved, his face purpling deeper with each breath. "But no more will we allow these Oyalander devils' affronts to go unanswered," Akinwande growled, turning to stalk before the troops. "By every ancient code and ancestral right, we are bound to unleash the full untempered wrath of Iwoland upon those who have profanely defiled our family's bloodline." He stopped to face the assembly, fists clenched so tightly his rings cut into his palms. "I hereby decree a brave Suthar be formed, the most merciless, cunning group of trackers and slayers our realm has ever assembled. You shall spare no village, no stone in scouring every corner of these lands and those beyond to retrieve my son. If he yet lives, you shall liberate him from whatever mind pollutions have been enacted. But if..." The king's face twisted with disgust. "If you discover he has been irredeemably soiled and turned by that Oyalander serpent whore Adaku's generations, then she will be made to embrace the cold finality of a sacrificial pyre's purification. This blasphemy must be permanently excused before it can fester." A tense silence hung in the throne room as the ruthless gravity of Akinwande's orders sank in. Finally, from the back ranks, one particularly seasoned warrior spoke up in a gruff voice. "You honor me with this solemn charge to hunt down these insults against Iwoland, my king. The first am Jagun, life-bound master slayer who has culled entire civilizations in your name. On my obsidian blade, I vow to extract your noble seed from whatever profanities may be poisoning him." Jagun rose and approached the dais, dropping to one knee before Akinwande. The wizened mercenary locked eyes with the furious monarch. "And should we find that Adaku has turned the prince from his righteous path, her blood shall become the first ceremonial draft to reinvigorate the ancient rites. My blades thirst for this creed, my liege." Something wicked glinted behind Akinwande's scowl as he appraised Jagun's vow. He knew the legendary obsidian daggers of this cult assassin had spilled the blood of countless foes who threatened Iwoland's supremacy over the centuries. To deploy such a ruthless weapon against his own son's captor may prove a necessary cruelty. The king leaned down until his face was mere inches from Jagun's. In a harsh whisper, he sealed the dark covenant. "See that this dissolute snake is permanently unmade if she has sundered my heir. No betrayal against Iwoland's core lifeblood can go unredressed through whatever purifying rites necessary. This dread resolution is now forged between us." Jagun's gaunt features turned up in a skeletal smile. With a curt nod, he rose and rejoined the mooncast assembly of death stalkers about to embark on their most profane mission yet. As for Akinwande, his face remained twisted into a haunting amalgam of paternal fear and cold, marrow-deep hostility. Regardless of his son's ultimate condition, the wayward Prince Azubwag's greatest sin was allowing this cosmic dalliance to fester long enough to give root to such unshakable wrath in his father's calcified heart. For the arrogant king could no longer differentiate the notion of tough love from darkest vengeance when it came to eliminating potential trespasses on his dynastic supremacy. In his blinkered vision, even Azubwag's sacrosanct blood created no exceptions to the ancestral savageries he was oath-bound to uphold at all costs. In Oyaland, whispers began to spread about King Akinwande's search party scouring the lands for his missing son Azubwag. These rumors eventually reached the ears of King Olawale himself. Olawale stroked his graying beard as the reports were relayed to him in the royal courtyard, his brow furrowed with suspicion and concern. "So Akinwande grows restless and has unleashed his warriors to hunt for the prince," he said in a grave tone. "I fear what ruthless actions that bitter man may take if they locate Azubwag and my daughter together." One of Olawale's advisors shifted uncomfortably. "Your Highness, based on the whisperings, it seems Akinwande has made clear that no affronts against his dynasty will be tolerated. Some even speculate he may order harsh reprisals against the princess herself." A hush fell over the courtyard at those ominous words. Olawale's eyes narrowed. "That arrogant fool allows his pride to blind his judgment," he growled. "To threaten the life of my beloved Adaku over this star-crossed dalliance with his heir." The king slammed his fist on the armrest of his throne, making the gathered advisors jump. "I will not sit idle while that warmongering snake potentially puts my daughter in mortal peril. Summon my viziers and have them gather our strongest soothsayers and mystics." If a Kinwande insists on deploying his brutish trackers, we shall match it with every protective incantation and cloaking enchantment in our power. Olawale rose, his royal robes billowing around him as he began pacing in agitation. That rabid dog wishes to hunt my Adaku down like some forest prize. Very well. Let his pathetic huntsman try to pierce the veil of a kingdom utterly committed to shielding its people from his barbaric tantrums. He whirled to face his advisors, eyes blazing. The mystic powers of our realm shall weave a sanctuary so bewitching, so thoroughly impenetrable, that a Kinwande's entire army could be turned to dust searching for just a single hair from Adaku's head. Let that unhinged king choke on his own arrogant ambitions. The advisors traded worried glances as Olawale stalked away. Hell-bent pawns be damned, no family member would be sacrificed to slake that madman's egomaniacal bloodlust if Oyoland had any say in it. Olawale pointed an imperious finger at the nearest advisor, his voice low but laced with steel. You will also begin assembling whatever furtive assassination cohorts and shadow cabals we can muster, for if it comes to protecting Adaku, by permanently removing that paranoid king's twisted ambitions from this world. His eyes narrowed to slits of obsidian hatred. Then so be it. The cycle of ancestral savagery ends with this generation, no matter how many Ewelander mongrels I must feed to the abyss to make it so.
Write the word continue in the comments section if you want the next part, and please subscribe to our channel.
Thank you for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching. Kindly click the subscribe button, like, comment, and share this video. Watch out for more intriguing and eye-catching videos from your favorite YouTube channel.